Hello, it is Speedpaint time. As usual, be wary of screen flashing and quick movements when watching this, as it is a sped up screen recording that I cannot fully control. Somebody mentioned to me that my shop hadn't been updated in 3 years. Oops. So I figured I would add a few things. That said, this video is only going to be showing you one thing. I've wanted to play with Photoshop's pattern maker mode for a while, so I set out drawing a bunch of Shadowclan cats to put in a design. With merch, you've got two options. You can either make vaguely overpriced, kind of bad quality stuff with a drop shipping place, or you can make decently priced, good quality stuff on your own by making it your entire life. But most of why I have merch is because people ask for it, so here I am with some merch that people did in fact ask for, but none of it's really high quality. It's just dropship. It's Teespring. That's the place I use. I simply do not have the time in the day or the money in my pocket to, make merch myself. Or even hire someone to make merch for me. That would cost more than I was making off the merch, probably. While you can see my brushes a little bit here in the recording, keep in mind that most of mine are heavily modified versions of other people's brushes that I got from the asset store, so it's not really right for me to be giving them away. You can look up the brush I'm using, but keep in mind that I've probably changed a million little background things about it, and I can't remember which brushes I've changed and which brushes I haven't. My first problem is that I can't remember which brushes I've paid for or not. So like, even if I hadn't modified a brush whatsoever, and I'm constantly modifying the brushes, but even if I had done nothing to it, I can't exactly give it away because I gave somebody money for it to begin with. The cats in the reference pictures are just cats that I have downloaded. Some of them are pictures of friends' cats and not my cats, as I do not have 6 cats. I understand that the reference is covering part of the canvas too, and I fixed that pretty soon. The first cat that I line in color is Cloverfoot. I don't really have strong feelings about what Cloverfoot should look like, but I do always make her eyes green, as a name like Cloverfoot feels like it implies it. The style I'm going for is pretty cutesy. Big heads, big eyes, almost no feet or paws, short little legs. If given the option, I probably would just draw all cats like this all the time. I can't help it. This is very much a situation where I am doing whatever I want. Color-wise, in general, I'm being pretty loose because I know that when this gets printed on something, it's probably gonna be, color inaccurate. Tawny Pelt is next. I make her a dilute torty because of my association with the word tawny. As a paint color, usually it's used for like an orangish color, but in other contexts it's used for like what color lions are, and dirty blonde hair dyes, and tawny owls who are honestly more of a yellow-brown than an orange, and tawny eagles who also follow that sort of color scheme. So my associations with the color tawny have never been with the paint swatch. So if I think of tawny, I think, oh, the color lions are, so I really can't help but make her golden like her mom. I also like it when tawny pelts look very unlike Tiger Star and Brambleclaw, especially in color, because in the book she's basically disregarded compared to her brother who looks more like their father. If she looks too much like Brambleclaw, that whole plot thread kinda gets tangled in my opinion. Next up, some background kittens. Their mom is Cinnamon Tail, their dad is Slatefur. I designed these guys a year or two ago for a picture and just kind of redid them from memory here. The black cats in this picture all come out a little bit dark on the printed versions of these, which is something to remember for the future. A computer can display a lot of shades of black and dark gray, and a Teespring printer cannot. In general, I paid very little attention to the various colors I was using, which didn't really end up being an issue except for in the, dark colors. But if you're ever making something for a print-on-demand shop, make the non-outline blacks lighter than this for sure. I'm not happy with the black kitten's weird shading either, but I guess that doesn't end up mattering. Next up, Hop Whisker. She's the only cat in Warrior Cats described as a calico as opposed to tortoiseshell and white. There's no difference between these two words, they're more regional than anything. Americans and Canadians tend to say calico. In cats, the distribution of tortie patterns is actually very heavily affected by the cat's development and not just their genetics. Cat color genetics are on their X chromosomes, which is why only a cat who has two of them can be a tortie. This is why male tortoiseshells are all either intersex or chimeras. Cats with a lot of white on them have bigger solid patches than other torties, which gives the misconception of the idea that the calico and the tortoiseshell are genetically different. But the white is a separate gene, and while it does affect spot distribution on a cat substantially, it doesn't have anything to do with if or not it's a tortie or something else. Torties without white are capable of having large patches of color too, especially on the face, but the easiest way I can describe that is, think of it like in a normal tortoiseshell cat, as the skin is being made for the baby, all of the color pigments are having a fight, so they're getting all jumbled up and try to go wherever they want. But if there's a lot of white, they don't really have anyone to fight because there's nothing in their way. This is a super simplified version of how it works, and I'm probably wrong on a couple points, so don't use Moonkitty as your genetics professor, but yeah, it's interesting. Basically, it's the same thing. A tortoiseshell cat and a calico cat, genetically, that is the same cat. White is a third factor that affects it, but isn't part of it. Oops, I got really off topic there. Anyways, next I did Light Leap with Birch Kit. I really like Light Leap. Birch Kit I made look pretty close to Birch Fall, but with Dovewing's eye color, as none of Dovewing's first litter of kits have her green eyes, and I usually make Light Leap mostly identical to her father, Tiger Star. She is the best tiger clone after all. Next up is Fringe Whisker and Spireclaw. I'm never really sure what kind of pattern to give Spireclaw, because if you make them look too similar, you've accidentally drawn two cats that look like, one's brown and one's black, but they're twins, So giving them anywhere around the same amount of white causes a little bit of a problem. A definite problem. So I tend to let Fringe Whisker have the greater white distribution and make Spireclaw back off the white distribution a little bit. But by chance, I think this is basically how everyone handles it. Like, even between designs where they do kind of look a little bit too much like siblings, you'll notice that the Spireclaw usually has less white. The reason for that is probably Warrior Cats Wiki inspired, though. Too much power. Too much power over the children. Next up is Whirlpelt. Every time you design Whirlpelt, you give Whirlpelt from BlogClan a new persona. This is the eternal price you pay for getting your OC name in the books. That and the authors putting your OC in Barry Nose's Warrior Cats version of 1 Million Moms. Everybody say sorry to Whirlpelt. I said Barry Nose there. I said Barry Nose instead of Barry Heart. I guess we also have to apologize to Barry Nose because he just got slandered. Here we have Tigerstar, Pounced-Up, and Dovewing having a little chat. I liked Pounced-Up a lot better as a kit when she wasn't a tabby, maybe just because I saw it first, but oh well. Dovewing even says none of the kits but Shadowsight resemble her in the broken code, so I guess this is fine. I've been giving Dovewing a little white spot on her chest semi-recently. I've been putting spots on her head since I was a kid, but I don't remember why. I do remember why I kept doing it though, and that was because a friend on DeviantArt when I was like 17 said something like, "This is cute, but next time you should get rid of the alien markings on her head." And since then I doubled down and always put the alien markings on her head. If you're doing something in your art that's completely harmless and arbitrary, like putting spots somewhere, don't let somebody tell you to stop doing that. PSA. Shadowsight is next. He had some leaves in the sketch, but they felt out of place, so instead he stands here looking terrified. I didn't make him look super chewed up, but I did intend to at least give him a scar. I wonder what happened. I must have totally forgot by the time I shaded him. Next up is Gull Swoop. I think she is funny. She's the cat I like giving red eyes. I think everybody has at least one cat they like giving red eyes, even though cats can't have red eyes, and Gull Swoop is mine. This is because I'm sick and tired of blue-eyed white cats, and by the time I got to Gull Swoop, I just couldn't take it anymore. I think it's because when I think of seagulls, I think about the red accents they have around their eyes, but yellow would be fine too. And then we have Slatefur. He is hunting a frog. Hello, Slatefur. I get to the frogs later. This Slatefur design is directly inspired by one by Trace the Hella Shark on DeviantArt, who basically made the perfect Slatefur that cannot be improved upon. I'll link them down below. So after Slatefur, who is my last cat, I moved on to plants. If you've seen these speed paints before, you know I'm not good at plants. Plants are my enemy. My attempts at a fern are so embarrassing that I don't include it in the speed paint part. I just deleted it instead. And my attempts at a pine bush are so embarrassing that I don't even use that in my final pattern. Oh well. You'll notice pretty quickly at this point that I am totally throwing out the idea that Warrior Cats takes place in the UK. All of these are US flowers and plants that grow in US pine forests. The quote-unquote line art style of art, especially thicker line art like this, really falls apart when approaching something like a pine needle or a thin stem. It immediately makes it clear that I am not using small enough details. None of this is to scale with the cats, especially not any clovers or flowers I'm drawing, but it's okay. They're not touching anyways, and I don't want to be too detailed about it. But you can see me really struggling with trying to make a lot of it work. I should have drawn more pine cones than I did, like a whole bunch of pine cones. It's too late now, I guess. When I finally do draw some pine needles, and by finally I mean after 4 or 5 tries at fixing a certain bush that took longer to draw than any given cat that I actually threw away anyways, I just drew them as lines instead of trying to line art them, which worked a lot better. After all that, I move on to little frogs and sparrows to make everything a bit more fun. Just some brown frogs. You could go, "But Moon, those look like toads," to which I respond, "Toads are just a type of frog. So they're frogs." The sparrows were a little awkward. I'm never quite sure where to ideally put bird facial features. It's easy to forget that these guys have eyes that are even horizontally with their beaks. So they're birds, their legs are just lines, and I gave them eye whites to be cuter. And then one last plant, because I decided I needed another if I was throwing away my ugly pine bush. So after everything is together, I bring everything into Photoshop to spread it out and compile it. While I did record all of this, I'm only showing a bit of it because it was so hard to look at. Like, way too fast for how long it took. So here's me wiggling things around, only slightly sped up because, again, it was very, very hard to look at. After a lot of little changes, I ended up on something I liked, and it was time to put it on Teespring shirts. But when I looked at the Teespring shirts, they were super blurry on the preview, which is normal for Teespring, but it was more than normal. So I decided to order samples of the products instead to see if that was the case. I ordered a blanket because it would be large, and a tote bag because it would be small, and the tote bag was as I feared, looking pretty good from a distance, but looking at it close up had like a pointillism effect. The details are hard to make out, and the plants are just green blobs, so I went back in and I edited the patterns on the totes and the shirt to be bigger. I wish there was a better way to know how things like this are going to turn out on something like spring. The blanket, however, because of the size, printed everything pretty well. The quality is sort of poor, of the blanket, because this is basically how all print-on-demand products are, and the designs can be hidden by rubbing the grain backwards. But the print is about as clear as it should have been, which is enough for me. The black cats do basically turn into shapes on it, though. Anyways, there's my speed paint, and my, merchandise review of my own merchandise, I guess? I gave my own merch a pretty lacking review, actually, but you know what? There are, I also ordered a sample of, like, a little hat, and, the embroidery was actually much better than I thought it was going to be, so there's one good note for Teespring.